In this video, we are going to look at one of the most helpful tools in all DAWs, automation. Now let's start with the most important thing. What is automation? In music production, automation is the process of having your DAW execute certain actions over time. Now this can be literally anything. You can have knobs and faders move or plugin parameter or any parameter in your software instrument do what you want to do at a certain point in time. It will make more sense when we will look at some examples. So to access automation, you can either click on this button up here, or you can press A as in automation and it will bring up the automation view. Let's get rid of the mixer. Now as you can see, everything becomes darker in color and the channels that already have some visible lines on them, just like this one, that means that they already have automation, and the ones that don't, like this one above it, it means that they do not have any automation. Also, before we move on with automation, maybe you don't want to have all of your channels go into automation mode, automation view. Maybe you want to change only the one that you're working on. There is a way of doing that, but it depends on how zoomed in you are. So in normal zoom mode, if I make my tracks really small, so let's press A. So if they're like that, and then I press A, as you can see, it makes everything bigger and takes them all in automation view. So if I go back to this normal size, now if I use the Control Z function and the tracks are not terribly big, then I can use automation view in only one track. So Control Z, and I'm going to press A. I'm too zoomed in, I'm going to go down a bit. So that's the point that I have to be zoomed in. So now only the tracks that I touch will go into automation view. But that depends on how zoomed in you are. So if I go one above, everything will go into automation view. So let's get rid of Control Z and let's actually make everything quite big so you can actually look at what we are working with. Now let's take the most usual type of automation you will be using, volume automation, and let's look at how automation works. Now let's say that I want a specific part of the vocals to be louder. So let's listen to the phrase.
We've shared almost everything.
Now let's say that I want the word everything, these two right here, to be louder. That only for this word I want to raise the volume fader and then take it back down to its previous volume. So I simply have to draw in the automation, and there are many ways of doing that. Normally, for that you can either use the pencil tool or your main tool, the pointer. So with the pointer, I'm going to click to the point where I want to start raising the volume, so about here. So one click to activate the automation, and then one click to add an automation point. No need to double click, just single click. If you want to remove an automation point, then you double click on it. For example, if I want to remove that one, I double click on it and it removes it. And it's okay if it's not exactly where you want it, because you can always grab the point and simply move it wherever you want. So the way it works is this. I will create 2 points before the section I want to automate, so one here, and 2 points after it. And then simply I'm going to click and hold the line between them and either raise the volume, raise the line, or lower it to adjust the volume. So if I raise it here, and if you look at the fader here or here, you will see that it will jump up.
We've shared almost everything.
Just like that. And as you can see, it tells you by how many decibels you're raising it or lowering it. It won't be very accurate if you're not zoomed in enough though. If you want to be surgical about it, you can hold down Control and then raise or lower it. That way, no matter the zoom state, it will raise it or lower it by values of 0.1. So I'm going to hold down Control, click first and then hold down Control. And as you can see, it goes up by values of 0.1. Also, when you hold down Control, it won't let you move the automation point. So if I grab this one, hold down Control, it won't let me go left and right. It would only allow me to raise it or lower it. Also, if you think you messed up and you want to cancel what you're doing, instead of letting go and pressing Command Z, you can press Option, and that will bring it back to the last selected value. So if I do that and erase it and I hold down Option, it will just bring it back. And if you keep holding Option, it will lock it in place. And that's a very useful function when you want to move an automation point and copy it at the same time. So that's one way of creating points. I use another way, which I think is a bit more efficient, but I have to show you everything. Now the other way involves the Marquee. And if you remember the tools videos, numbers 24 and 25 of this series, between the pointer, the Marquee and the shortcuts, you can do almost everything without having to change tools. So instead of using the pointer to create 4 different automation points, I can simply use the Marquee, which is my secondary tool, and simply make a selection. So let's actually delete that. I will make the same selection with the Marquee. I will let go, and then I will simply click on it. That creates 4 automation points. So if I grab the line like before and pull it up or down, I have essentially achieved the same thing with less steps. Of course, you're not bound to simply one track at a time. For example, these 2 phrases, the tracks, are exactly the same. So I can click and drag to do the exact same automation on as many channels as I want. For example, let's Ctrl Z, let's activate that as well. I will use the Marquee. I will now extend the channel underneath that, and I can simply click here. And now I have the automation for both. Let's Command Z. So once I have my automation, let's actually create something. I can select it, select all of it. I can drag it to move it. So let's say I want to adjust it here. I can press Command C to copy it. So I'm going to press Command C and then place my playhead to where I want to paste it. So let's say I want to paste it right here at the beginning of 13 and press Command V and it will paste it. And I can do that as many times as I want. And I can actually go to another track. If I select this one and press Ctrl V, it will actually paste the automation on a different track. Let's go back up here. What I can also do is hold down Option after I make my selection. So let's say I make my selection of that one. I hold down Option and then I click and drag to create a copy of that. I click and drag to create a copy of that, just like that. And then of course I can delete it. I simply select the portion that I want to delete. So let's say I want to delete everything, this portion here, and then simply hit delete on my keyboard. Now there are other ways of deleting automation through the mix menu, but we will look at those in a bit. Also, not very useful when it comes to automation, but you can also have your automation snap to whatever value that you want. So the way you do that is you go to the snap menu up here, and then you go to the snap automation. On the menu that appears, you choose the value that you want. So for example, let's do bar, and then you must select active. If you don't, your automation won't snap to the grid. So let's press active. Let's say I'm going to put it here, but as you will see, it will place it on or exactly bar 13. So I'm going to click here and it places it on bar 13 because it snaps to the bar. So let's deactivate it. And let's delete that. Now let's move on to the tools. The difference between those and the pencil is that the pencil will actually draw in automation. So let's change to that. Pencil. And let's draw some automation. As you may be thinking, that is mostly used for plugin parameters. And for most of the mixing automation you will be doing, the pointer will be preferable. Speaking of tools, let's Command Z. We have 2 tools dedicated to automation. One of them is completely useless and the other has some uses. The useless one is the Automation Select tool. In older versions of Logic, you couldn't make a selection with the pointer tool and then move it. In newer versions, you can. So this tool does exactly what the pointer tool does. There is no need for it in the newer versions, but they left it here for some reason. So if I select it, change to that, I can select my automation point and then move it. But I can do that with a pointer, so it's completely useless. Now the other tool is the automation curve tool. As the name suggests, it can create curves on your automation lines. So there are two ways of using it. Let's actually make that a tad bigger. So I'm going to raise that one. Let's bring it here so you can actually see it better. So I'm going to press Command. Now if I click and drag up and down, it will create a curve. And if I click and drag left and right, it will create an S-shaped curve. So up and down for curve, right and left for S. Now let's change back to the Marquee. Now, depending on the kind of automation that you have, you will get different values. Volume, for example, as we have seen, has numerical values. It can range from -infinite to 6 dB. Panning, let's do panning, will go from 0, let's click to activate it, this is 0 for 0 panning, and it will go up to -64 all the way down to, is it +63. Now minus for left and plus for right side panning. Now when you want to turn something on or off, you simply get that. For example, mute will only have mute on and mute off. So just these two values. So what I'm saying is we get different values and you can automate everything. As you can see, we can have many types of automation on one track at the same time. And if you look closely on the region, each will have a different line color that represents its automation. If you want to mute an automation parameter, you can go here and click on the on-off button that appears when you hover your mouse on the name. So I can just activate it or deactivate it. To change between different automation, you have to click here and then select the one that you want from the list. The ones that you have already used will be under the used category. Another way of changing the displayed automation parameter is by right-clicking anywhere on the region. So right-click here and then going to automation parameter. And essentially you get the exact same menu that we did with the name up here. If you want to have more than one, or actually all of them visible at the same time, you can click this little arrow up here. Let's make it smaller so that you can see it. And now that opens up all the available automation. If you don't like the order, you can grab one and move it to wherever you want. For example, let's say I want the pan to be the second one. I can simply grab it and move it. And if you want to hide one or some of them, you can click on the X button that appears when you hover on it. So let's say I don't want the pan, so I will go here and then click on the X button and I can hide that. Now, if I want to add another one, even if it's one I haven't used yet, I can click on the plus button down here. It will bring up the ones that I already have, but I can change it to whatever I want. For example, let's do solo now. Now let's hide all of them by clicking on the arrow up here once again. Let's make them bigger. And let's see how we can delete automation. The way it is right now, let's change back to volume. The way it is right now, the visible automation is the one that is selected. All automation is active, but the one that is selected, volume in our case, is simply called visible. Now let's look at the different ways you can delete automation. Always make sure that the track you want to delete its automation is selected. Now, you go to Mix and then you go to Delete Automation, and here we get 5 options. The first one, Delete Visible Automation on Selected Track, will delete the selected automation parameter on the track. So the one we said that is the active one. So in our case, once again, it will be the volume. So look at what happens, delete visible automation, and it just deletes the volume and doesn't touch the other automation. So let's Command Z, let's go back to Mix, delete automation. The second one, delete all automation on selected track. That will delete everything, the visible and the other automation. So as you can see now, it's completely clear, absolutely no automation. Command Z, back to mix. The third option, delete orphaned automation on selected track. That has to do with MIDI controller data, and we will look at that in a bit. The next one, delete redundant automation points. That will delete automation points that do nothing. For example, let's create some new automation points. Now these automation points do nothing. They do not change any of the values, so they are redundant. So when I select this option and click on it, you will see that it will delete them. Just this one, the redundant ones. And the very last one, delete automation, delete all track automation, will delete everything on the whole project, on every track, visible or not, it will have its automation deleted. Now another way of accessing two of the options in that menu is by right-clicking on the track while in automation view. So right-click on it and you will see delete visible automation and delete all automation. If you are not in automation view, so let's press A, as you can see these options will not appear. You have to be in automation view. Now let's make them smaller and look at another thing. In Logic, we have two types of automation. We have track automation and region automation. Everything that we will look at is exactly the same for both types. The only difference is that track automation will be applied to the whole track. So no matter how many regions we have, it starts from the beginning of the project and it goes all the way to the end. And region automation is applied only to a specific region. So when you open automation, by default, it will be on track. Change it, click where it says track. So let's do this once. And as you can see, we no longer have one line going from the beginning of the track to the end. Now each automation line is region specific. As before, I can do what we've done so far. So let's solo this one as well. I can create some automation points, make some changes. Now I can go ahead and move this region and the automation will be on the region. It will follow it wherever I put it. So if I move it here, it will follow it. It's stuck. It's with the region. On the track automation though, it is not region specific. So if let's use this one. If I move any of the regions, then I will get this message. That will ask me if I want to move the automation I have created with the region. So if I press move, you will see it will move the region with the automation as it is, just like that. Let's Command Z, let's move it again. Let's bring it here. Now, if I press don't move, it will move the region and leave the automation exactly where it is. It's a bit more convenient to use region automation with software instruments, but you can use it with both. When it comes to mixing, I believe that you will mostly be using the track automation. But if you want to change the settings of what it does when you try to move a region, simply right click on it and then select one of the options. Never move, always move, or ask to move. The default will be ask to move, and that's the one I personally prefer, so we will leave it at that. In case you're wondering, if you have some region automation, it will bypass the track automation, even if you have switched to that. For example, let's use this crazy automation we have here. Let's make it even more crazy so you can actually be able to listen to the difference. Let's have a listen to this one.
My heart dangles from a string. My heart dangles from a string.
Right, and now let's switch to track. And so the line is up here.
My heart
and even if I create some automation on the track and I'll take it all the way down, so technically we shouldn't be able to hear anything, but listen.
My heart dangles from a string.
As you can see, it completely ignores the track automation. So what do you do if you want to move the region automation to track or vice versa? You can do that via the mix menu. So let's say we want to move this one to the track. So you go up to mix, then you go to convert automation and you get 4 options. Let's select it first. There you go. So you get four options. In the first two, I can convert the visible from track to region or from region to track. And on the next two, I can convert all the automation and not just the visible. So let's try to convert the visible region automation to track automation. And just like that, it is converted. Now it extends from the beginning of the project all the way to the end. And of course, it has changed to the track automation. And as you can see, if I change back to region, the previous automation no longer exists, as it now is track automation. Now these are the main tools that are available when you open the automation view on a track. If you have any plugin loaded, and that can be either an effect or a virtual instrument, that will of course give you many more automation options. Now let's look at an example. Let's load an effect directly on the channel first. Let's do something to the word everything again, and let's make it a bit wobblier just for this example. So, if we're talking wobbly, we should use the RC20. There you go, wobble. Now there are many ways of going about it. If I'm automating one parameter, just one parameter, then I can simply have the plugin turn on and off. If I'm automating more than one parameter though, then I will have to specifically automate that parameter. Now let's look at everything now. So I'm going to turn everything off except for the parameter that I want to use. I'm going to turn this one up a bit. Let's actually have a listen.
We've shared almost everything.
There you go. I want this effect just for the word everything. What we can do is go here and expand the parameters. So if you go here, you will get this list. But to bypass anything for any of the plugins, you need to go to the main and then go to the insert. Now that will be insert 4. Because if you count the inserts down here in our plugin slot, the RC20 will be the 4th insert. So bypass insert 4 bypass. So I can click on that. I can go to the waveform and activate it just for the selected portion. So what I'm going to do is click here. No, it's the other way around. So I want this one to be up here. And then bring that down here and bypass it here. So right now, so this will not be bypassed.
We've shared almost everything.
So just for the everything.
We've shared.
And you can look at the plugin right here. As soon as it gets to that section, it will turn on.
We've shared almost everything.
Now, if you have to automate more than one parameter at different times on the same plugin, you can't bypass it. Now, there are 3 ways of going about it. Even though you will never use some of these methods, I will show you everything. So once again, let's delete the visible automation and let's look at the most laborious method. So let's say that I want to have the wobble keep doing the same thing, which is to be active when the word everything comes in. And then let's say we want let's use the digital, turn on for the word, what's the one before that?
We've shared almost.
For the word almost. So do 2 different parts in time. So I can't simply turn the plugin on or off. So there are 2 ways of going about it. I can either have these components turn on and off, not the plugin, the components, so just like that. Or I can automate the amount, so I can have it go from 0 all the way up to the amount that I want. So let's do the latter. Let's do the digital one first. And let's actually turn that on. And what I can do is to go to the list and go to the RC20. And then usually you get a huge list that you might not know the name of the parameter that you want to automate. For example, there are certain synths that will give you a huge list and there's no way you can know what it is. If you can't find the name for it, you can use one of the methods that I will show you in a bit. For this one though, it's actually at the very top. I've seen that. So digi means digital. And let's actually use the amount. Now the parameter will be active here. I can go ahead and automate it. So let's actually use the Marquee. Click on that one And let's bring it up here. Let's have a listen.
We've shared everything.
Just for that. And then let's say I want the wobble. So let's, we can either do a mount or we can do on and off. Same as before, I can just click here. RS20 wobble, we can do enable. I can click that, so that would be enabled. So that's on. I want that to be, no, not like that. Yeah, so on for here, just for this word, and off for the rest. So as you can see in the plugin, actually let's click on this arrow here and look at both. So for this one, let's do digi amount. You will see that the digital will turn on for that, for the amount, and the wobble will turn on just for this section here.
We've shared everything.
And that's it. Of course, if you're going to gradually increase or decrease, you have to use the amount, and you can do something like that, for example. So the second method, which I used all the time when I first started using Logic, I was not familiar with the software, that was to change to the touch mode and then simply touch, click the parameter that I wanted to automate. So let's do the same thing. Let's actually automate the digital amount. So I changed my automation mode to touch, and then I simply touch the parameter that I want to automate. So in this case, the digi amount. And as you can see, it becomes the active, the visible automation. Then I will simply go back to read mode. And now the activate parameter will be the one that I touched. So I can simply just click on it and then just, do whatever I want to do like before. Let's Command Z. And the third method, which is the quickest one and does the same thing, is to have the automatic selection of any parameter be activated without having to turn to touch mode. You can still be in read mode. So let's delete everything and then go to mix up here and then select Autoselect automation parameter in read mode. Now look what happens to the active automation as I'm clicking on different parts of the plugin. You see it changes to exactly what I click, no need to turn to touch mode. Now, none of this will take effect unless I actually create some automation. So just because I clicked on space, it doesn't mean that it now will appear on my list when I open it. So let's look at that. So you see there's no used parameters here. Now, but if I actually go ahead and actually create some automation, so let's say I do that and create some automation with that, then I open my list, you see that under the used parameters, I do have the space amount. So that's the way of automating effects that are on a track. Now, as you may know, we don't always put the effects on a channel. We actually use sends and aux tracks. I know we haven't looked at aux tracks yet, but let's see how we can automate the effects on those tracks. Again, there are two ways of going about it. The one that I prefer is to automate the send amount. For example, one of the plugins that you usually do not place on the track directly is a reverb. So I already have an aux track with a reverb on it. So what I'm going to do is to create a send and send some of that signal to our reverb. Hold down Option and click on it.
We'll share our
There you go. So this way, in case you're a complete beginner, we can blend the dry signal with the effect. More of that at a future video. So now let's say that in a certain part of the track, say the chorus, I want a bit more reverb. So I don't have to make a copy of my track and then send that to the reverb and then just erase the signal I sent. I can simply automate the send. So like before, open up the automation list and then go to, it's actually already there because that's the beauty of having the Autoselect automation parameter. It will automatically select it. Let's say you didn't have it selected, then you would go to main and then you'd go to your sends and it is on send 1, it will also give you the name. You select on that one and it will be right here. Now you can go ahead and automate the reverb send for the parts that I want. For example, I don't want that much reverb. Double click on it, delete it. Let's say I want more reverb just for this part here.
We've shared almost everything.
Just like that. The other way you can approach it is by creating a visible AUX track in the tracks area and then automating that. So in Logic, when you create an AUX track, it is only visible here in the mixer, not in the tracks area. So select the AUX track that you want. So in our case, it would be the reverb. Right click on it and then click on Create Track. And that creates a track now that we can actually go ahead and automate. And I can, for example, bring the volume of the reverb up a bit or lower. So I will click on it. And just like before, I will turn it down. And just for this section, I will do that.
We've shared almost everything.
So you can do that as well, but you can do a bit more. So for example, I can actually change a parameter of the effect. So let's say that I want for a certain section of it to, let's do the pre-delay, for example. Same procedure, I can click on the pre-delay fader because I already have Logic on the Autoselect automation parameter. So when I click on it, it will change to that. And then I can simply go ahead and automate that. So let's do, again, these last two phrases have a lot of pre-delay.
We've shared almost everything.
Just like that. So let's delete that and let's actually start talking about the modes. Next, we need to talk about the different automation modes. Now, these modes are responsible for how your automation is treated. Meaning, you can either read or write automation. And you can also trim your automation or even record some relative value automation data on top of existing one. We will look at everything. Now, by default, all of your tracks will be, let's go back to volume, they will be on read. That means that Logic will read the existing data that you put in during playback. And it does just that. You can't change the value of anything. It only reads back the automation. There's only one exception to that, and that is that you can actually record region information directly into the MIDI region while you're in read mode. Now, there's no need to look at more examples because everything we have looked at so far was in read mode, so you know exactly how it functions. So the next mode is touch. Now, the only difference with read is that you can also write automation while in this mode. If you don't touch anything, if you don't click on anything, then it will behave as read. But let's look at what happens when I actually move something while in playback. And let's actually move the fader volume.
We've shared almost everything.
As you can see, we can also write automation. Now, once you have made your changes and then you release your knob or fader, whatever you're controlling, then the parameter will jump back to the initial automation value of the track. So I started from minus 5.3, and once I let go here, it jumped back to minus 5.3. Now, if you don't want that and you want your value to stay exactly where it is at the moment you release the knob or fader, then you need to use the next mode, Latch. So let's delete that and let's change to Latch. And that is actually the only difference with touch. Now look what happens to the automation when I make changes during playback. Let's use the volume fader again.
We've shared almost everything.
As you can see, it now stays at the value it was when I let go of it. Now the last mode is write. You should be careful with this one because it will delete everything, even just while in playback. Take a look, I'm just going to press play, I will touch nothing.
We've shared almost everything.
As the playhead passes over your automation, it will delete it. And that's what we use this mode for. If you want to record new automation and delete the existing one, then you use this mode. And as you can see, it then jumps back to touch as a safety precaution, because in case you press play again, it will actually delete your automation. So right will always jump back to touch. Now, as you can see though, we also have two more options here. We have trim and relative. Now, both of these do the same thing. You can use them to modify existing automation. None of these modes are available with read. So let's start with trim, which is available for touch and latch. And let's actually switch to latch. You know you are in trim mode because a T will appear before latch. Now with this one, you can proportionally offset the existing automation. So you don't have to write new automation. You can just modify the existing one. So for example, let's use the volume again to modify what we already have. So when you change to that, the fader down here will go to the middle and it will become transparent. So let's write some automation now.
We've shared almost everything.
Now it looks like we added some new automation, but in reality, all we have done is to adjust the original automation that we have.
We've shared almost everything.
Also relevant to that, if you want to adjust the automation of the whole track from beginning to end, you can simply do so by adjusting the trim field here. So this one, you can raise it or lower it, lower everything at the same time. Now, if you want to add a new layer to your existing automation that will actually offset the active automation, you can use relative. Now, the new added layer that will be created can be edited separately and it will work together with the absolute value. So two automation lines that won't be fighting each other, well, depending on what settings you use, and the final result you will hear will be the combination of both. I know it's a bit complicated, but it's easier if I show you how. So to better understand how they work together, let's actually create the exact same opposite automation for both relative and actually let's delete that. So for both relative and absolute. So let's do that. Let's open another volume. Let's do touch. So let's make this one our relative. And let's use the Marquee tool to do the exact same spot on both. And let's simply click on that. So for my absolute one, which is down here, I will take it all the way up to 5.5. Let's use the control, one more, 5.5. And for my relative one, let's take it down to minus 3.5. So now let's have a listen with the relative mode deactivated.
We've shared almost everything.
Also look at the trim field here. It will jump from minus 6 to 5.5.
We've shared almost everything.
So now I'm going to activate the relative one and look for the value here and listen for the change in volume.
We've shared almost everything.
It's not as loud, and the absolute value, instead of 5.5, it jumped to plus 2 dB. Why? Because the absolute value was 5.5 and the relative was minus 3.5. So 5.5 minus 3.5 equals 2 dB. And that's how these two lines work together. And once I'm happy with the result, I can consolidate those two lines into one. I can right-click on the region, on our automation, and then select the Consolidate Relative and Absolute Volume Automation. Now, what will the final result be? As you can guess, because of what I have explained, it will be 2 dB. So just like that, plus 2 dB. So you might be wondering what happens if we have the exact opposite automation for both. So let's Command Z. And let's put the relative one, that's not what I want to do, let's put that down to minus 5.5. And let's actually have a listen.
We've shared almost everything.
nothing happens. They cancel each other out because they are the exact opposite. And if I consolidate them, the final result will probably be 0. There you go. And now the very last thing I want to show you is how to record automation using a MIDI controller. That is very helpful if you're doing electronic music or if you're playing live. Any MIDI controller that has knobs and faders will do. The first thing you need to do is to assign a controller to a specific parameter, and it's very easy to do in Logic. So I have this long sustained note here. Let's have a listen. Not very musical, but it'll do for this example. And let's say that I want to write automation using one of my MIDI controller knobs and also write it live as it's playing back. So I'm going to press Command and comma and then go to automation. Then all the way down to where it says automation quick access, I'm going to turn that to on. I'm going to press on assign. And then it will tell me to slowly move the control I want to assign. So let's use the first knob, let's do this one. So I'm going to move it. Let's press A to look at the automation. So the active automation is volume. So I can now control the volume with this knob. And also, if Autoselect automation parameter in read mode is enabled, then this automation here, the active automation, will be assigned to whatever I click on. For example, if I click on cutoff, now I can control the cutoff using this knob here. But I can add more. So I will turn this one off, and I can go to either to edit, to access the controller assignments window, or I can simply click on Shift, Option and K as in kilo, and that will bring up this window once again. Normally it's on easy mode when you first open it, easy view, but for this one we want the expert view. So I can keep that as is, or I can delete it and add as many as I want. So the procedure to do that here is to click on the bottom right corner where it says Learn Mode. So I will click on that, and then I will click on the parameter that I want to learn. So let's once again to cutoff. So it's on cutoff now, and then I will move the controller that I want. So let's once again to this knob here, and now it says learned. But as you can see, the cutoff is not moving. And that's because Logic has a bug. So whenever you do that, usually it's messing up the values for maximum and maximum. So it would only move by 1 point. So since that's MIDI, I want that to be at 0 and that at 127 in order to have the full range of motion for the knob. So if I move it now, you can see that the cutoff can go all the way up and all the way down. And you can see it here as well. I can actually control it with this knob. So let's assign another one. It's the exact same procedure. So what I'm going to do is click on Learn Mode, and let's do Fold. So I will click on Fold, and let's do the knob next to that. So I will move that one now. And now I can control Fold with that. That one is 0, 127, that's fine. So I will close that. And now I have two more knobs where I can control the automation. Now to write automation, as you remember, we need to be either on touch or latch. So let's do touch. I will press play and I will simply write automation using the knobs. Right, let's not continue that, but you get the idea. And let's turn this one, let's hide that one, and let's actually bring everything up. And now you can see that, no, that's not the one I want. Let's do the fold. Now you can see the automation has been written exactly as I have performed it. And you can add as many parameters as you want, or more precisely, you can add one for all the knobs that you have. That's actually everything about automation that you need to know. It's a very powerful tool that you need to add to your toolbox. And I'll see you in the next one.